The date is June 1st, 1972. It begins like any other day, but little did everybody know that one of the most influential bands of all time would be releasing their very first record. I'm talking about, of course, the Eagles, with their self-titled debut album, releasing songs like Take It Easy, Peaceful Easy Feeling, and Witchy Woman. The Eagles have had a long career of great successes, including having the #1 best-selling record of all time. Now, of course, I don't believe that this was all by chance, that this was all luck. I believe that there are techniques and concepts that we can look at by listening to their music and analyzing it, and we can implement what we learn from listening to their music into our own music and create something great. Today we're going to be diving into one of my favorite songs by them, New Kid in Town. I'm not gonna waste any time, let's dive into my computer right now. How's it going today, guys? So today we're gonna be taking a look at the Eagles' New Kid in Town. This is one of my favorite songs by them. I think you guys will like this one, so let's just dive right into this. So the first thing we're gonna talk about, of course, is the introduction. Now, this song starts off with basically just the entire band. You've got the Rhodes piano playing, you've got the drums, bass, rhythm guitar, lead guitar. But it starts off, there's a pickup on the end of 3 in the Rhodes piano. Let's take a listen and then we'll start breaking this down for you. Alright, so as you can see, one of my favorite parts of this introduction, I would say, is that we have the Rhodes piano playing and then the lead guitar comes in right after. So it's kind of a call and response effect that we have going. So just for instance, right here, let's just solo the lead guitar and the Rhodes. See how that kind of works? It's kind of a cool, a call and response is a really cool thing that you can add to your music, whether it's between 2 instruments, whether it's between 2 vocal parts, or like a guitar and a vocal. So as far as the drums, it's pretty much just a basic beat. If we're gonna solo this. Right, just a super straightforward rock beat. The bass. Basically just outlining the chords a bit more rhythmic. Let's do drums and bass together and hear what that sounds like real quick. Right? When you have a busy drum part, you don't want a busy bass part. It's going to muddy things up. On the opposite side, if you have a busy bass part, you don't want busy drums, right? Now, obviously, neither the bass part or the drum part are overly busy, but the bass part definitely has more going on in it than the drums. So that's something to keep in mind as you start writing your own music. Let's talk about the chord progression real quick before we move on to the first verse. Now, the song is in the key of E major right here. The rhythm guitar is an acoustic guitar, and essentially it's just playing the chords. There's nothing too difficult going on here. It's really just outlining what the progression is. So with that in mind, let's just take a listen to what it's doing real quick. Right, so you can see here, it's just an E major chord, E major, goes into a B, another B major, then it goes into an A chord, and then back to the B, and then back to the E. That's basically the progression. One final thing that we should talk about here is just the melody, just briefly. The melody starts on the 5th of the scale, which is going to be a B natural, and it leads up to the root here. And when it hits this note, that is going to be the 2nd, but it goes back down, and then it goes up to the 3rd as well here. and then it leads back down to the 5th. Later on, right here, essentially what that's doing is it's going from the 2nd to the 7th, up and down. So, and then the electric guitar here is basically doing hammer-ons, pull-offs, and some slides. Right here are the slides. So, it's a pretty cool melody. So now moving on to the verse, let's just take a listen at what we have going on here. You can hear that the band pretty much does the same exact thing as it did in the intro. You can see the bass part here is exactly the same. Let's take a listen to the Rhodes here. So Rhodes basically is just playing the chords at this point, doesn't have the melody at all. The only difference really is going to be that the lead vocals take over the melody at this point. Everything else is basically the same. So the lead vocals here, they start on a G sharp, which is going to be the 3rd of the scale, and they go up to a D sharp here, which is going to be the 7th of the scale. Ultimately, they end up going back down and they end on the 5th of the scale here. And then we get to this measure right here. So this measure begins on the 6th, kind of goes up to the 7th and goes back down. Ultimately, it ends up back on the root. Next phrase. It's essentially the same exact thing, right? Okay, now this is pretty much exactly the same as well. The rhythm changes a little bit just because he changes the vocals throughout this. Now the part that I want to talk about, we're gonna listen to everything now. Just listen to the end of this phrase. Alright, so I'm going to actually take the vocals out here. Listen to this again, just with the band. See how that's kind of a descending progression, and it sounds a little bit out of key. Now the reason for that, it's not actually out of key, but what is going on if we just solo the 2 guitar parts? So what is happening, it's not actually out of key, but this chord right here is actually going to be a G suspended 4th chord. This chord right here is going to actually be a D sharp major chord. Now, the reason that you would have a suspended 4th, essentially what that means is that you have a G sharp and you've got a perfect 5th above like you would have in a normal triad, but instead of having either a minor 3rd or a major 3rd, you've got a suspended 4th, which is essentially just a perfect 4th above the root. Essentially what that does is it creates some dissonance between the perfect 4th and the perfect 5th, because that's only a major 2nd away from each other. So just listen to this chord real quick. It's going to be real quick. Hear how dissonant that was? So it's a pretty cool chord that you can throw in. There's suspended seconds too, which is essentially the root of the chord. Then you've got a major 2nd, and then you've got the perfect 5th above that, and that creates dissonance between the root and the major 2nd as well. So that's something to keep in mind as well as you're writing your music, as you're writing progressions. You can add some interesting chord progressions in by throwing in the suspended 2nd or the suspended 4th chords. So now moving on to the chorus. Now, one interesting thing here is that the 2nd vocal part comes in here. Basically, all that the 2nd vocal part does is it stays a 3rd above the lead vocal part. Also, before I forget, the organ is actually added in at this point of the song. All right, this is what it sounds like. Now you can also hear that the third and fourth vocal parts come in as well. Now these are what makes the Eagles the Eagles. They always have these really cool harmonizing vocal parts within the music. Now real quick, as far as the progression goes, it's a pretty easy progression that we've got going. The one interesting thing about it is that it actually switches to B major for a portion of this, for the portion of this chorus. So it goes from a C sharp minor, which is going to be the minor 2 of B major, and then it goes to an F sharp major chord, which is going to be the 5 of B major. I'll just mute out all the vocals real quick. You can take a listen to what we've got going. Okay, so now right here, it actually switches back to E major. It goes from an F sharp major chord here to an F sharp minor, which is going to be the second, or the minor second of E major, right? And then it goes to a B7 here. So one more time from right here. And then right there, it ends on an E chord. All right, so real quick, I just want you to take a listen to the vocal part by itself. Okay, so now like I was saying, this is in the key of B major here. So this is going to start on the second, and it's going to go up to the fourth and back down. Okay, now what's interesting about the harmonizing part here is that, like I was saying, it's just a third, or it's just a third above what the lead vocals is playing. But here you can see that it's at the 5th of the chord, and then it gets to the 4th of the chord before the lead part goes to the 2nd of the chord, right? So you can see this is tied over. This drops down beforehand, so it gives you a little bit of dissonance. Let's take a listen to that real quick. It's just a quick amount of dissonance, but it's a pretty cool thing that they added into this song. Now let's listen to the next phrase. This is going to start on the 6th of the chord actually, and it goes up to the 2nd, up to the 3rd, 4th, back down to the 2nd. So this next part is pretty similar to this first part right here, so I don't want to take much time. I'll let you listen to it real quick though. The rhythm is a little bit different, but after that, not much has changed. All right, so now this next part is, let me just solo the lead vocals by itself actually. Take a listen. So that's just a little tagline to close off the chorus that Glenn Frey added in. With that though, the 3rd and 4th vocal parts come in at the same time. Take a listen to that. So that basically just, it holds the chord even further. Take a listen to that one last time with everything else. Okay, so the next section that we're going to talk about is the second verse. Now, this is very similar to the first verse, except for the opening here. Now, let's take a listen to it. Now you can hear everything kind of drops out except for the vocals. Everything holds, but nothing else is playing except for the vocals have a new melody line or a new lead line. So after everything comes back in, the chords are exactly the same to what they were before, so you don't have to worry about the progression here. But what I do want to talk about is the vocal part. So let's just listen to it by itself real quick. Now you can see here that the vocal part starts on the 3rd, and it uses this triplet rhythm that's pretty cool. And it goes up to the 7th, and then it drops back down to the 6th. Ultimately, it ends up on the 3rd again. Next phrase. This is basically the same as the first verse, right? Except for this little line at the end. Now what's cool about this is that it's doing an upper neighbor. Now if you don't know what an upper neighbor is, think of it like this. So in this case we've got an A and it goes up to the B, right? So it goes ba-da-do-da-ba-da-dum. Essentially what it's doing is you have the A, it goes up to the B, then it goes back down to the A. Essentially what it is you just go up to a note, go back down to your original note. Now you also do have lower neighbors as well, which is just the opposite. You have an A for in this case, and then you go down to a G sharp and then back up to an A. Just a little music theory to throw at you guys so that you kind of know what's going on when they wrote this part. This next part is pretty much the same as the last one. So this time it starts out the same, but it goes up to the F sharp, which is going to be technically the second scale degree. But if you're thinking of it in terms of the intervals, it's the major ninth. And then it drops back down to the octave, back down to the fifth, and then it finds its way back to, actually it goes back to the second here. So now this next part is really pretty cool for the harmonies. Now what they have going on here is they have the third going up to the fifth, and it goes up to the sixth, and it holds over, and then it finds its way down to the fifth again, down to the third, back up, stays on the fifth, and then it finds its way down to the E, which is going to be the root. Okay, so now that goes into the next chorus, which is pretty much the same as well. Okay, now, so we're going to look at right here. So this part, measure 50 to measure 51, is exactly the same as the first chorus, okay? Now this is where it changes because it adds in the vocal part this triplet part. Now remember that we're in the key of B major again here. So the notes are essentially going to be the same. The rhythm has just changed up here. Now this time, instead of going all the way up to the fourth and then back down to the second, it actually keeps going up to the sixth. Now one thing that I'll say is that once it reaches this point here, it actually does become the third. And the reason for that is that it switches back to E major. So a little confusing there, but let's just listen to this one part. Okay, so now you can see here, so it starts on the third, right? And then it goes down to the first, or the root. And then it goes back up to the second, and then it slides down to the root again. So now the next section of the song, this is more of an instrumental. I'm just going to focus on the guitar solo here. So let's just listen to this part real quick. Okay, so I honestly love this riff right here. It's a really cool riff. But you can see that the solo starts off with a little bit more interesting chords. What he's doing on the guitar is he's actually playing the same chord just in different positions. So this is all on an E chord right here. This is an E chord, this is an E chord right here, and this is an E chord all the way up here. Now this part is a little bit different. He actually just stays on a B chord but plays it in different positions. And then the solo comes in. Now let's solo the lead guitar here. So the next section of the song that we're going to take a look at is the bridge section, and it sounds like this. So you can see it's a pretty different section of the song from the rest of them. I will say that they do keep a lot of the triplet notes in the melody here, as you can see. Well, let's go ahead and start off with just talking about the chord progression for this section of the song. So the chord progression here is going to be a B7 for 2 measures. It goes to an E major, goes back to the B7, then it goes to a C sharp minor, and then what ends up happening is we have an F sharp major 7 chord. Now what's happening here, we're going to talk a little bit of theory here. So what they end up doing is they actually take the 5 of 5, which in the key of E is going to be B major, and then what ends up happening is they go back to an A minor. Now the reason for this is because they switch to the key of G major here. So if we listen to just the rhythm guitar here, you'll hear this modulation to the key of G. So then what happens here is they have they've got a C major chord up to a D major chord. So after we have the F sharp major 7 chord here, it goes up to the A minor, right? Now, like I was saying, this is the new key here. And so we've got the minor 2nd in the key of G. It goes up to a C major chord, up to a D major chord, and then it lands on the root of the scale, right? And then that goes into the 3rd verse, which is in the key of G major. We'll talk about that in a little bit. This song is pretty straightforward for the most part. And so the main thing that we're going to talk about is the vocals. Let's just start off with the main part. So now what they're doing here is they're starting on the 5th of the scale and they're going up to the 7th of the scale. They're hanging that 7th over right here, doing a triplet like they were doing before, up to the 2nd. Then they drop down to the tonic again. So now we're in the 2nd phrase of the bridge section, and it's going to sound like this. So exactly the same as the first part of the first phrase. Then we have... So now what they're doing here is they're going from the 5th of the scale and they're going up to an A, which is going to be the 4th. And they drop down to the E again here. So then from the E, they drop down to the 6th of the scale. Now this is the modulation part of the song. See, we've got a C natural, which is where they begin to switch to the key of G. There's no C sharp in the key of G, of course. So we've got the C natural here, which is the natural 6th scale degree, lowered 6th scale degree. And then that drops down to a B, and that ultimately drops down into an A, which is going to be the 4th scale degree. Now here it goes all the way back up to the E, which is the root. And it ends on the F sharp. This is setting up perfect for the key of G because this is the 7th scale degree of the key of G, right? So it leads up perfectly onto that tonic note. So now moving on, let's go ahead and talk about the 3rd verse. Now, as I was saying, this is going to be in the key of G here. It sounds like this. Now it starts on the 3rd and it goes up to the 5th, and then it goes all the way up to the 7th down to the root, and then all the way down, and ultimately it ends on the 2nd scale degree here, right, on this melody part. The next phrase is going to start on the 6th scale degree in the key of G, drops down to the 5th on D, goes up, and then it goes back down here. Ultimately it ends up on the tonic here. It sounds like this. Now this next part, it actually starts on the root. Ultimately it ends up landing on the 2nd scale degree. It sounds like this. So now here it does this cool triplet thing where it goes up, right? So it's on the 3rd scale degree and it does a triplet up to the 6th scale degree, and then it goes all the way back down to the 3rd, and then it does a triplet down to the 2nd. And so then this next part of the song, this next phrase rather, I find it a pretty powerful section of the song, or just a part of the song because you've got all the vocals doing this triplet melody here. Now what they're doing there is we're starting on the 3rd, and then it goes up to the 5th of the scale, and then it raises up into the 6th, stays there for a little bit, goes back to the 5th, drops to the 3rd, back up to the 5th, down to the 3rd again, and then it ultimately goes down to the root. So now the chord progression, we're starting off on a G, stays on the G for a measure, goes to an A minor 7 to a D, A minor 7 to D as you can see here, goes to a C major chord, back to a D, and then it goes back to the G. Now the chord progression by itself is going to sound like this. And actually looking at it, it is the same exact chord progression, it's just in a different key. So they really didn't change much with this section of the song, it's just in a different key. Everything else is basically the same other than the rhythms and the vocal part as well. So now let's go ahead and talk about actually the last measure of the song, or of this section of the song. And it's going to sound like this. Let me mute out the vocal parts real quick. You can hear, just listen to the electric part. It does this slide thing here. Just go ahead and solo it. See, it does that slide thing, and then it starts to pick out the chord there. And then it does this do-do-doom. Now as far as the chords go, so those last two measures are just going to be a G major chord, and it goes to a B7. It's a little bit different. It doesn't have those the suspended chords like it had before, and it doesn't go to the D chord, I think is what it was before. So now going on to the next chorus, let's listen to it real quick. So the chorus starts off on the 6th scale degree, goes up to the 7th, and it goes up to the root like before, and goes back down to the 6th. Then what ultimately happens is it starts on the 3rd, has that little lower note, and then it raises up to the 6th scale degree again, and then it goes back up like before to the root. It pretty much just does that on all of these. It just switches up the rhythm. And then here, what it actually does is it goes from the 3rd and it drops down to the root. Now this is where it gets kind of interesting. This is where the modulation back into E major happens. So it starts off on the 2nd scale degree, and it goes up to the 6th, the 7th, and then the root, and then it drops back down to the 7th. So then what happens, and technically the key change happens right here. All they're doing is they take the 3rd scale degree in the key of G, go up to the 7th, and then they take the root and they sharp it. So they just raise the root and then go up to the A, and then in this measure we're in the key of E again. So the next section is going to be the outro. I'm going to lead into it with this phrase right here. It's going to sound like this. Alright, so that's going to be the first half of it. You can see, so now we're in the key of E, and it lands on this G sharp, which is going to be at the 3rd scale degree. Here we've gotten the vocal part as well. It's raised up on the B in the 2nd vocal part, and then it's actually on the tonic in the 3rd vocal part, and then it's up on the B as well in the 4th vocal part. Then it drops down to the A, and that's going to be the 4th scale degree. Everything is pretty much like it sticks it sticks with the scale for the most part. Like I was saying, it's not that difficult of a melody. And then this one, of course, is also pretty similar. See, now what's interesting there is we've got a natural or a C natural again. So this is actually going to be an A minor chord as well. As far as the progression real quick, we've got an E major chord. That one goes up to a G sharp major chord. Here we've got an A chord, and then that goes to the B7 again. And then that goes right back to the E chord again. But what's different, like I was saying, is that it goes to right here. So rather than going to that B7, it just goes to an A minor 7. So then chord progression for the last section is super, super simple. Just an E major to a C sharp minor and back is all it is. So now the rest of the parts here, whole thing. So that pretty much repeats to the end. But if we look at this part here, so we've got the F sharp and it goes down to the E, of course, and then this kind of, just solo this real quick. Right, so we've got the E and then it doubles right here on the D sharp down to the C sharp, doubles that. Then it goes down to the B and then it drops down to the G and back up to the B. And then it goes up to the C sharp, down to the G. And then that pretty much honestly just repeats to the end. Let's just listen through this again. Okay, so this part right here. Now it goes up to a G sharp and then it drops down to the 5th of the scale, the B, and then it raises all the way up to an octave here. Now this section here, when you listen to the actual song, there's some vocal variations that he does as he goes back down to a B. And then real quick, we should talk about the drum fill here. You know, it's not a super difficult drum fill, but I would say it's more iconic for the song. You hear it and you know that it's this song. And what that's doing is it's setting up for the different sections here. See, so all he's doing is just a measure of time, and then he does a measure of fill. Let's listen to the bass part in this section as well, because it does get a little bit more busy. Okay, so it's really just, it's hitting the roots of the chords for sure. I would say having that space, and then also it's a little bit more funky. Now let's just listen to the rest of the song to the end. Pretty much repeats over and over again, 3rd up to 5th, up to 6, and then it ends on the 3rd again. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching. I hope that you enjoyed that. Thank you for checking out this video, guys. I hope that you enjoyed it. Now, I want to offer you a free gift that I've put together for you. If you click the link down below, you'll get a PDF of my chord progression flowchart. By downloading this PDF, not only will you get a free chord progression flowchart where you can just pick a key and start writing your own chord progressions, but I have also put together a number of chord progressions for you so that you can pick a key and just start going through the progression and kickstart your songwriting process. I put this together for you because I can remember back when I started writing my own music, and I had a very difficult time coming up with chord progressions. The chord progression is the foundation of the song. It's what takes you from point A to point B. If this free gift sounds like something for you, then go ahead and click the link down below in the description and I'll send it right to your email for you. Anyway, thank you again for watching this video, and we'll see you in the next song analysis.